What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about some must-add waiver wire targets heading into week 5 of the NFL season. I feel like we're in a very interesting spot here this week because this is the first week where we actually have teams on bye. So 4 teams on bye. We have some notable injuries at the running back, wide receiver positions. We all know the tight end position has been a mess for pretty much everyone. So this really might be the first week where you're looking at your starting lineup and you just don't feel great about it. Maybe you're missing a running back, you're missing a wide receiver option, you don't like who you're playing in your flex. So these are going to be guys that I think could slide into your lineup here in week 5. Maybe they're just rentals in your lineup for 1 week, but I think some of these guys also have some juice long-term here. So if you're feeling desperate, you need someone to pick up, hopefully this video can help you out here. So we're going to start off by talking about a couple of running backs. The first one here is going to be Trey Sermon, rostered in 30.9% of leagues. We saw that Jonathan Taylor suffered a high ankle sprain. We weren't quite sure if he was going to play this week, but right before I started recording this video, Shane Steichen came out, said that they are ruling Jonathan Taylor out. Now, he did also say that they're going to be running a running back by committee, which obviously is not ideal because if you're picking up Trey Sermon, if you view him as the Jonathan Taylor handcuff, you would like him to say, Sermon is going to be our guy. But I still don't think that means Sermon is unplayable this week. When we look at the non-Jonathan Taylor snaps, Trey Sermon has taken 78% of them. And this is also not a spot where Trey Sermon is their 2-minute drill guy, their third down back. I think his skill set is probably more catered to Jonathan Taylor than being that random third down guy that's in there for a receiving role. So he's taken 78% of those non-Jonathan Taylor snaps. Jonathan Taylor has had an 88% opportunity share of this backfield. He's averaging over 20 opportunities per game, and he also has the 7th most red zone touches. So I'm not expecting Trey Sermon to come in here and take over 100% of Jonathan Taylor's workload, but if he's taken 65 to 75% of those opportunities, we could be looking at 15-ish opportunities here for Trey Sermon. And in a week with buys, you might be desperate at the running back position. I do think you could do worse than Trey Sermon as a flex play or a super desperate running back too. So Trey Sermon, I do think he's playable this week, even though, this might be a running back by committee here. And then the other running back who I think is kind of interesting is going to be Antonio Gibson, rostered in 32.6% of leagues. And pretty much through the first 4 weeks, Gibson was just viewed, at least in my opinion, as the Ramondre Stevenson handcuff. He was the clear-cut running back too, but Ramondre Stevenson has had some major ball security issues. He has fumbled 4 times in the first 4 games, and it's gotten to the point where Gerard Mayo has talked openly about potentially starting Antonio Gibson over Ramondre Stevenson here in week 5. We look at Antonio Gibson. He's been very effective with his limited opportunities. He's averaging 5.3 yards per carry on 29 attempts. He's been targeted 8 times, caught 7 of those for 82 yards. So solid catch rate, solid efficiency on the ground and in the air. And it's very possible he ends up leading this team in touches in week 5. I don't know if this is a long-term thing where he's just going to take over as the guy. They extended Ramondre this offseason. I do think they like Ramondre, but maybe he kind of gets put in the doghouse here in week 5. Antonio Gibson ends up operating as the starter. And so I do think if you're desperate at the running back position, you could do worse here than Antonio Gibson. Now, looking at the wide receiver spot, I actually think there are some really interesting wide receiver options who could be out there. The first one, who in more competitive leagues probably is not going to be widely available, we have Xavier Legette, rostered in 34.1% of leagues. He had a breakout week 4, had an 88% route participation, which is really strong, was targeted 10 times, caught 6 of those for 66 yards and a touchdown. I do think he could be a desperate week 5 play, but he's one of these dudes that I think has real upside rest of season. When we see these young players, these rookies start to break out, personally, I want to buy in on them because they could just keep it going moving forward. We've seen these guys who have these nice breakouts in the second half. It was Rashee Rice last year. We saw Amon-Ra St. Brown just tear it up. Elijah Moore, I know he hasn't done a ton since then, but towards the end of his rookie year, he was absolutely balling. So once these guys show us they're talented, we want to buy in. In Andy Dalton's 2 starts, he's attempted 40 and 37 passes. So they're going to be in a lot of trailing game scripts. They're likely going to be fairly pass heavy if they are trailing in these games. They're fine letting Andy Dalton go out there and rip it. So Xavier Legette, definitely playable here in week 5, but I also think he's someone who could, maybe even turn into a reliable starter later on in the season. Then we're going to have a couple of Rams wide receivers here, starting off with Jordan Whittington, who's rostered in 8.5% of leagues. And I definitely think he's playable this week. In week 4, we saw Whittington lead the Rams in routes. He had a 97% route participation, also led the team with 8 targets. He turned it into 6 receptions for 62 yards. He was someone that was getting a lot of hype in training camp, was playing a lot in the preseason, was fairly productive. Obviously, he needed injuries, to Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua to kind of open up this role, but it seems like they like him, a young player. This is a team last year who had like a day 3 pick, Puka Nacua, come in, dominate. I'm not saying he's going to be like the next Puka Nacua here, but the fact that they trusted him to lead this team in routes, I think is fun. Led the team in targets, definitely someone who I think, could slot into your lineup here as a flex play, wide receiver 3 option here in week 5. And then the other Rams wideout here is going to be Tutu Atwell, rostered in 20.5% of leagues, and he has received starting wide receiver snaps in each of the last 2 weeks. Week 3, he went 4 for 93. Week 4, he went 4 for 82. So back-to-back games with 80-plus receiving yards. He also had a very impressive 3-game stretch without Cooper Kupp in 2023. To start off that season when he was on IR, he went 6 for 119, 7 for 77, and then 4 for 50 and a touchdown. And I think he also had like 20 rushing yards in one of those games. So he's been productive, last year without Kupp. He's been productive in back-to-back games. Definitely someone who I think is playable. Then we have Josh Downs here, who was rostered in 30.1% of leagues. And I really like Downs as a player. I like him as a prospect. And I actually think he is a really, really strong play if Joe Flacco isn't at quarterback. Richardson has been a limited participant this week. He might play, he might not. If Richardson does play, I'm really not interested in Josh Downs at all. But if Richardson is out and we're getting Joe Flacco at quarterback, I think Josh Downs could be argued as like a high-end wide receiver 3, maybe even to like top 24 wide receiver territory. In week 4 with Joe Flacco, he was targeted 9 times, caught 8 of them for 82 yards and a touchdown. He's a talented player. We know Joe Flacco is going to support his weapons, so definitely someone to keep an eye on if it looks like Richardson is going to miss. Another wide receiver here, we have Tre Tucker, who's rostered in 14.8% of leagues. He's actually had back-to-back really strong weeks. Week 3, he went 7 for 96 and a touchdown. Week 4, 5 for 41. He also added a carry for 3 yards and a touchdown, had a 96% route participation. Devontae Adams is going to be out again this week. You have Jacoby Myers, who should be lined up here as the number 1 wide receiver, but he is likely going to draw the Pat Surtain matchup, which has been really rough for fantasy wide receivers so far. So I do think this could be a spot where Tre Tucker has another strong game of usage. He's going to be running starting wide receiver routes, and maybe he's the guy that commands more targets this week because of that Jacoby Myers matchup. And then the final wide receiver here is going to be Romeo Doubs, rostered in 33% of leagues. He's the guy who week after week is leading this Packers wide receiver room in routes. The Rams have led the 10th most points per game to the wide receiver position. The Packers have the 2nd highest implied point total this week. He has missed, I think, the last couple of practices due to personal reasons. So maybe he doesn't play. It's something to monitor, but you could definitely do worse than like a starting wide receiver on this very good Packers offense. And then the final player we're going to talk about here, a tight end, it is going to be Tyler Conklin, who is rostered in 35.7% of leagues. It was an overall really rough week 4 for the Packers, but Tyler Conklin still had a 90% route participation, and he was tied for the team lead with 8 targets on the season at the tight end position. Conklin is top 2 in snap share, slot snaps, routes run, and route participation. So even though the production hasn't been there, the usage has been strong. You could definitely do worse than like a tight end with this type of usage on an Aaron Rodgers-led offense. So Tyler Conklin, if your tight end position has just, given you nothing, someone who I would consider scooping up here. I've actually got one more player for you guys who I forgot to mention in the running back section. It is Tyrone Tracy Jr., and so far he has operated as the clear-cut running back 2 behind Devin Singletary. Singletary has been dealing with a groin injury. It's definitely not a guarantee he plays this week. In fact, it seems like he might be trending towards not playing. So if Tyrone Tracy's out there, he could be like the direct replacement here for Singletary. Singletary has handled a pretty solid opportunity share. If Tyrone Tracy is stepping right into that, he's someone who definitely could be playable this week. And it's not like Devin Singletary has a ton of investment from this Giants team. Tyrone Tracy, young player, rookie, he's someone where if he impresses, flashes here in week 5, he could carve out a role for himself rest of season. So Tyrone Tracy, sorry I forgot about him with the running backs, but definitely someone who should be mentioned in this video. But that is going to wrap it up for some of these top waiver wire targets. If you are desperate for a play here in week 5, hopefully this video helped you out. If you enjoy, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.